Big 12 action gets underway this Saturday. For the first time being in the same conference, the Utah Utes and Baylor Bears will be playing each other. No, it's not technically a conference game, but we're fired up for Big 12 football. Will Cam Rising or Dequan Finn shine more in Rice-Eccles Stadium? Who has the edge on each side of the ball and who's coming out on top? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor crossover.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you are an everydayer, thank you so much for supporting our show. If you want to become an everydayer, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also follow our social handles. You find our shows both on X, as well as we love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well. I'm JT Wistrcill, Cam Stuart, Locked On Baylor with me. But before we dive into the football, we want to talk to you about the sponsor of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. And Cam, I'm excited to get this game started because this is the first Big 12 game we both have on our schedule.
Yes.
I can't fathom that it's not a conference one still. I understand why from a scheduling standpoint. It's just still such a strange thing, but that's college athletics in the world we lived in. And we'll talk about this year's matchup, all the angles, but I think the most important first thing is these two teams did play each other last year. It was game in Waco.
Yes.
They're so drastically different. I feel like you don't even really watch the tape. I think you really only focus on how this year's team looks and the new pieces that both sides have added, or in Utah's case, the pieces that have returned.
Yeah, I told my people, throw it out. Like, don't go off of last year's at all. I mean, you look no further than the quarterback matchup, Sawyer Robertson versus Bryson Barnes. Like, there's no comparison to it now. And that for better or for worse, you know, it's completely different. I am excited to get into the Big 12 here because technically not, but into the Big 12. It's not fair that Florida State got to lose a couple of conference games before anyone else even played one. Share the love a little bit. But yeah, I just throw out last year completely. It was a rock fight and not a good one, not like, oh, these two defenses are right. Baylor ended up finishing last in the conference in points per game allowed. It was just not an entertaining football game by any means. I know, at the time, Utah fans felt lucky to get out of there with a win, but knew that was not Utah at full strength. Also not Baylor at full strength, to be fair, but it was just not indicative of what either of those teams were, good or bad. I thought Baylor's defense played above what they played the rest of the season, but as inept as they could be at times, they were better than most of that offense in that game. Sawyer Robertson was kind of thrown out there, his second game into this new system that was very different from what he was playing in before. So yeah, throw that one out. Don't need it. We're just going to focus on JT, both our teams taking on FCS opponents last week and really taking it to them. Like, can you learn from that?
That's what I'm excited to see because both these teams look strong against FCS opponents. So now we get to find out, okay, step up in competition, how are these teams going to look? And because I've seen this group of Utah players, and I mean the individuals, there are some new parts that haven't exactly played together, but I know what Brant Keithy can do on the collegiate stage. He looked really good last week. I know the narrative that some people are trying to write about Cam Rising, but when you throw for a career high in passing yards, only have to play the first half. We're 10 of 15 overall. I thought he looked pretty dang good too. So
JT, can you break down why he is the 9th best quarterback in this conference, please? The floor is yours.
Oh, our good old, yeah, it was a fun quarterback list put out by Drake Toll in terms of passing yards in which Cam Rising was ranked there. But this is a great opportunity for Cam to and I will say it's one thing to, once again, to do it against FCS opponents. Now let's do it against a step up in competition. That's what it will be. So starting with this Utah offense against this Baylor defense, I feel good about this Utah offense. I think I'm excited to see how the Utah offensive line, that's my one thing where they were up and down last week. So and I think Baylor's pass rush is improved. I don't think it's great yet still. That's what you have to kind of earn that monarch, of course, but I thought it's a step in the right direction. So I'm excited to see that battle. I think Utah has receivers that can win in the secondary. I know this is a new Baylor defense, but you do need to make a massive jump from where those overall season numbers were last year, ranked outside the top 100 in yards per game allowed to opponents. And same thing with, there's some solid running backs here too, but I think there is a chance that Utah will have success running the ball. So I do feel like Utah's offense has an advantage against Baylor's defense. How do you feel about that matchup?
Yeah, well, what struck me as interesting, and I talked a lot about this, talking about Baylor's offense throughout the week, but Kyle Whittingham talked about it at the beginning of the week too. Neither team felt good with their running game against an FCS opponent. I looked at it with the Baylor game. I was obviously there, and I'm like, this just doesn't, it's not jumping off the page at me. And you look at the numbers afterwards, no running back ran for more than 4.5 yards a carry, which, in a Big 12 game, that's kind of whatever. That's fine. You could be productive doing that. But I found it interesting that I was thinking that, and then Kyle Whittingham was talking about Utah and saying, we didn't have anyone go for 5. We didn't go for 5 yards carry as a team. We didn't go for 5 yards carry. And that's where we need to be. That's the standard that we're setting. So both teams, similar wins against FCS opponents, 40-plus point victories where they held teams to 0 and 3 points. But yet you're thinking, I don't think they established the run enough, which is very rare against an FCS opponent. But in terms of this Baylor defense, it needs to travel for the first time, right? There's only so much you can learn about an FCS opponent. Looking at the personnel, this Baylor defense is better than last year. It just is. Keaton Thomas is one of the guys I'm real excited about. He's a junior college transfer, had a big week in week 1. He started his career at West Virginia, so he's played some Big 12 football before. And Jackie Marshall, who was injured last year, had a big week 1. So already personnel-wise, it's better. And having Dave Aranda as your play caller is better than what you had last year. This is a guy who's led top 10 defenses for years as a defensive coordinator before becoming a head coach at Baylor. And so already that stuff is an improvement from last year. Then again, they did not face a Cam Rising last week. They did not face an NFL tight end room last week. They need to show us, of course, in a hostile environment on the road, if that defense can travel. And if it's solid to good, doesn't need to be great. If it's good, that could really change the outlook, I think, for a lot of Baylor fans. I think an avenue towards a bowl game becomes much clearer if you see tangible steps taken by this defense. But one thing we got to watch out for, JT, we were both wrong about this in our season preview, and I'm going to pin this one on you. You told me Caleb Lohner wasn't going to play. You told me Caleb Lohner was not going to be a threat. The man is a red zone monster. He's catching touchdowns already. What happened there?
I am stunned. I will say that. I did not think that he would be contributing as well as he has, because we've seen
that was the biggest thing we were like in lockstep with.
I know.
Caleb Lohner's my story. He's not going to play, but here we go.
We've seen this before. He's going to be good at football because he's athletic. That's not how it works. But Caleb Lohner picked it up quick. Now I'm very curious to see against an opponent that is like of Baylor. Like, I'll say, I already feel like I was wrong for the amount I thought that Caleb Lohner would contribute on the season, but I am still curious, like in these close games, got to have it moments where, if you don't complete a pass, you feel pretty good about your chances to complete the next pass because of who you're playing. I'm curious if we continue to see a lot of Caleb Lohner, because he did have a bad drop in the end zone too. He pushed off a little bit before and then dropped it, but he did have that catch in the second half. Now that was with the twos. So that's where, once again, I do think I don't expect to see Caleb a ton in this game. You know how badly he wants to get the win here. And it's going to be fascinating because he is on the Utah depth chart. I still think he's like their 4th or 5th best tight end, but that's still only after one game. And it's a good tight end room. So really curious to see how much we'll see of Caleb Lohner, and just really curious in general to see how all the facets of this matchup end up playing out. We still got to break down more on both sides of the ball for this game, and that's what we are going to be doing in one moment. But first, we have to talk with all of you about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. You can just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook today. And if you download America's #1 sportsbook today, you can bet on the Utah versus Baylor game. The line is lofty. It's 15 in favor of Utah right now. Cam, I'll be honest. I think this Utah team's good at home. We'll talk about that a little more in a second. I think Utah's going to cover right now. Where are you landing on this line?
No, Baylor covering. That's some money in your pocket right there. FanDuel's going to take care of you there. Trust me.
Okay, Cam thinks they're covering. I think they won't. We're about to talk more about why in a moment. But if you guys want to be able to bet on this game, NFL action starts. The great slate of college games we have this weekend. You guys can head over and sign up at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook today. Cam, Stuart, JT Wistrcill here as we are rocking and rolling with our Baylor versus Utah preview. We didn't completely finish up everything with the defense, so I will just say, I think Kyle Whittingham bringing up the running game is interesting because I know he wants to see more, and we haven't seen lead backs, but it's also funny because Dejon Stanley and Mekhi Bernard, two of Utah's top 3 backs, did average 5.7 yards per carry. Bernard averaged 6.6. So at times Utah did have success running it. I don't think they'll average that number against Baylor, but I still think that Utah will have success running the ball here. So I do think that Utah is going, there will be times Utah stalls. As I said, I think Baylor will get a little bit of pressure here, but I do think Cam Rising is capable of making those plays. And I still, for the life of me, can't understand the negative discourse around his performance last week. Once again, I think he's still shown the ability to scramble a little bit when the need arises. That was his first game of college football since January 3rd of 23. For reference, Locked On Utes listeners, I know I say this all the time, but I still just find it crazy. Tom Brady had played a game more recently until Cam Rising played. So the fact that he was 10 of 15 and still with we can nitpick his performance, sure, but I just still think that's where I have full confidence in Cam. I have confidence in his passing attack, Dorian Singer, all of the weapons at Utah's disposal. And I do expect Utah ain't getting 55 next week, but I do think Utah has a good chance to eclipse 30 at home.
Yeah, and so I was going to ask you about that, is just the rust and knocking it off. I think if you're going to lay out a program for Cam Rising here, not bad, man. FCS, right? Baylor, who finished towards the bottom of the conference last year, but still should be a step up, right, from an FCS team. That's kind of a tough kind of thrown in week 2. And then you take on a Utah State team that you should be in week 3. And so that kind of sets up nicely for that Cam Rising aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, I like this Baylor secondary, though. I will say that was the one group I think we were all confident in going into the season. Caden Jenkins was the breakout star as a freshman last year and looked pretty good when I watched in week 1. So I think this is the first big test for him in his sophomore season. They're still youthful, but I think pretty talented at that back end. So I'm hoping that could cause some issues in the passing game, at least early on in this one.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun matchup to see. Hey, is Utah this passing attack? We've heard a lot about it. It looked really good last week. Can you do it against a Baylor secondary that has improved, a Baylor defense that I do believe has improved? So curious to see the game Cam Rising has. Also fascinated to watch Dequan Finn and this Baylor offense against a elite Utah defense. They pitched a shutout last week. They have pretty much everyone back from a top 5 rushing defense a year ago. Now there is an injury in the secondary. I feel like Utah still has the bodies to replace there and still be good. Is there going to be a drop off? Maybe a little bit, but I feel like Utah, let's also talk about this when we're talking about the Utah defense, because defense is where home field advantage comes in so much, right? And you could say offense too, because the stadium's quiet, but when the stadium gets loud, and I'm sure there's some of you that heard Drake Toll talk about it wasn't a great atmosphere last week, but It's a big difference between a Thursday night FCS game and a Saturday game, your first game against a Big 12 opponent. We've heard before, Kirk Herbstreit has raved about the noise levels that Utah reaches on third down. And if you're not one for like, okay, what's a little noise? Well, let's just talk about how good this Utah team is at home. They have lost one true home game post the 2018 season. And that was because they lost in 2020, no fans in the stands. That was to Baylor last year. It took a top 5 at the time team coming into Utah's house, or we can just say a top 10 team on the season and what Baylor ended up being, to beat them at home. And that's where I think Dequan Finn and this Baylor offense have their work cut out for them, because time and time again, I see offenses come in and I see them short circuit and have miscues. And I know Dequan Finn also had those 2 interceptions last year. There were a couple of 3 and outs in the first half. I like Utah's advantage on the defensive side of the ball going against a guy like Dequan Finn, who looked good at times last week, but is also still settling into this new offense and has to travel to a place that is not quarterback friendly.
Yeah, and I will say too, from that standpoint, Baylor, they didn't really play in a great environment last year. Kansas State on the road, it was a day game. It was towards the end of the season. Obviously, they punched the place out, and it's great, but I'm talking big-time environment. They haven't played in one of those since they played in Provo 2 years ago. I'm not going to say if it's the best in the conference or not, but it was a big-time atmosphere, man. It was a night game. It was a top 25 matchup. That place was really, really into it. And so a lot of these guys haven't played in it. One guy who has played in big-time environments is Dequan Finn. You're scratching your head. Cam, he played at Toledo. What are you talking about? He played in big-time environments. He played at a quarter full Ford Field for the MAC championship. Yes, but also has played pretty well at Ohio State and at Notre Dame in his career at Toledo. So we're talking about a guy who's got a lot of starts under his belt. That's not something that I think will necessarily bother him. The other guys, we'll see. This is an offensive line that's in progress in a loud environment. There's a couple of their big-time receivers maybe haven't played in that kind of environment. I'm looking at, Ashton Hawkins played at Texas State. Jamal Bell came in from Nevada. So it's not like big-time environments that these guys are used to. But there are some who are. Dequan Finn, Michael Trigg was at USC and Ole Miss. Katron Jackson was at Arkansas. So it's kind of a mixture of both. And it's up to Dequan Finn's leadership, I think, one of those intangible things, to see how quickly they adjust to that. Because I do like Dequan Finn. I've given him plenty of critiques this week. He is a good quarterback. I don't know that he's as good a quarterback as he thinks he is sometimes when he's dropping back to throwing a lot off his back foot, which is not going to work in the Big 12. So it's got to be something where if Dequan is in control of the game, I like what this Baylor offense can do, even with limited guys in the backfield. They don't know that Dominic Richardson is going to play. He was essentially their starter last year at running back. Bryson Washington probably not going to play. So they have this 4 running back stable get whittled down to 2, and one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the Big 12, which I think Dequan Finn is. So it's up to, I think the quarterback in terms of how quickly they can get settled in and play on the road. Because that's been a problem the whole Dave Aranda tenure. I mean, even when they went 12-2, they lost both their games both their losses came on the road. So it's still something that this coaching staff needs to get adjusted to, as well as these players. But then again, there are some injuries on that side of the ball, especially that Kenan Johnson one, an outside cornerback. I gotta imagine. I know Whittingham says they're going to move a slot guy over there, but I gotta imagine that's a step back.
Yeah, it's definitely a step back. I think the biggest place where Baylor can hurt Utah, and I know I just talked about Utah's rush defense, but I think it's Dequan Finn's legs. I absolutely think he is I totally agree with you. He's one of the best runners in the Big 12 conference at that position. What he can do in the RPO game that Baylor ran last week, it looked really good. Just the option game in general with him. Utah before has had some difficulties with those types of quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson shredded them a couple years ago. So I think that is what's going to be interesting.
And I was going to say, Dave Aranda said after the game, he wished Finn ran it some more, with some of those RPOs. In fact, one of them, one of the picks was one that he definitely should have tucked it and ran. and might have, made one guy miss and got a touchdown. So that is something that I think Baylor will dip into that bag of how can Dequan affect this game with his legs. And I think that plays into a real good, really well into Baylor's hands.
If Baylor wants to shock the Big 12 and go into the Big 12's favorite house and beat Utah, it doesn't come, I believe, with running backs running right up the middle and having success. I just think Utah's defensive tackles and linebackers, they're too good. They're going to sniff that out. But I think it can absolutely come from receivers making some plays downfield, which is what happened in last year's game on a couple of Baylor drives, and even one that almost ended up being a game, setting up a game winner with the craziness that happened, the ending theatrics. And then Finn, not just scrambling, but once again, that read option game, keeping it himself and getting to the outside because he has that ability to make defenders miss. That's where I think Dequan Finn can have success. But he also did turn it over a few times, not just last year, before his career. What's your confidence level in him taking care of the ball in a place that does have good success rate for turning over opposing quarterbacks?
Yeah, that goes back to where I say Dequan Finn's a good quarterback, maybe not as good a thrower as he thinks he is. I thought those were two bad picks, man. And it could have been more. It could have been 3 or 4. He had one called back, one go off a defender's hands. It's just I'm going on the optimistic side of Baylor did not open up the playbook all that much against an FCS opponent. I know Utah would have gone through the same thing with their FCS opponent, but it looked like, oh man, when did we see that in practice where that worked? When did we see Dequan Finn have the arm talent for that to work? If it's on the tape somewhere, I'd love to see it. So yeah, it's decision making, and that's where I do get worried of a guy who comes in. He is one of, if not the best player on this team. He's supposed to be leading the team. He hears about how he needs to be the X factor and how, their head coach's job could be dependent on how well this quarterback does this year. And he might try to make some things happen that can't be made to happen in a place like Rice-Eccles against a good team like this Utah defense. I'm worried. I am worried about that decision-making and taking care of the football.
Yeah, it's something where Finn is going to have to play better than last week. Can he make that much of a turnaround against that big of a jump? That's what we have to see. And there are a lot of intriguing angles on this game, and we've talked about a number of them. So we got to predict how we think it's going to turn out. Can Baylor make an early Big 12 statement? Will Utah try to make a Big 12 statement in terms of announcing like, hey, we're here and covering that massive spread? That's what we are going to be talking about in one moment. But first, want to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of our Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor crossover. It's our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find those right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're just simply looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring because small businesses, they wear so many hats. They might not have the time and resources to hire. And that's where LinkedIn comes in and gives an assist to all businesses. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's all caps, no spaces, Locked On College. Once again, all caps, no spaces, linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. To post your job for free, terms and conditions do apply.
JT,
alrighty. Yes.
If I could, because I know we're gonna get into predictions here, and I know we said don't think about last game, but I couldn't stop thinking about it during the ad read.
Go.
Did you think it was pass interference at the end of the game last year?
Last year? Oh, so this is the thing. Like we said, I genuinely haven't watched that play in so long. But I'll be honest.
What an answer.
I remember thinking it was a good no call because of the situation of the game and that it was the right call to let him play out there. I forgot that it was. I was trying to remember exactly the controversy because you're right. The receiver for Baylor made the big play and Miles Battle got bad coverage, and then there was the close call on the pass interference. I would have to watch it again to definitively say this is why it wasn't, but I remember and will stand by. I think a no call was the right call in that situation.
I thought it was pass interference. I did. Then again, it's one of the few times in my life that I've had this realization so quick. Like I saw the first replay and I was like, yeah, that was pass interference, but like we shouldn't have won this game. You know what I mean? Like you always say that in retrospect, but this was the quickest it's ever hit me. I was like, yep. Should have been a chance for a game tying touchdown at the 1 or 2 yard line, but we shouldn't have won. We just gave up 2 touchdowns the last 3 minutes of the game or whatever it was. Like, that probably wasn't it. But I wanted to get your take on that. Okay, so this is like classic homerism going at it. I thought it was pass interference. You don't. I haven't seen it in a year. I just remember so definitively at the time being like, that is pass interference.
Yes, it was quite the controversy. I'd be interested to hear your guys' takes in the comments as well, because I knew it did cause quite the stir last year. And, last year's game, Cam. It did. Yeah.
Fine, I'll do it. I'll rank Cam Rising 9th in the conference. I don't care. And you know what? I'll keep talking about that atmosphere at BYU. It was electric. Best I've ever heard in anything ever.
I deserve that. And because of that foul statement that I made, we both obviously we love Drake, but I need to know my Big 12. I need to know my Big 12 host. Cam, please offer your prediction for this game first.
I told you Baylor's going to cover.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a little lower scoring than people think. I wouldn't be surprised if either team gets in the 30s. Even for, needing to improve the run game. You know what, JT, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick Baylor. I'm going to pick Baylor 27-24. They get revenge for last year. Most of the guys weren't even out there, but they get revenge for last year. It's close, of course. 27-24 Bears.
This would be the type of win that, in my opinion, can go a long way to saving Dave Aranda's job.
Huge.
When you look at the controversy and everything, because I'll be honest, we talked about this before the show. I think Utah absolutely should be the 10th ranked team in the country right now. If you look at how that Michigan team looked last week, what they lost, I think Utah should have vaulted Michigan. They didn't. But as great as a top 10 win is, top 11 win's still pretty good.
As a new Big 12 fan, by the way, you do need to root for Michigan this weekend. I don't make the rules. You have to do it. But now that you're in the Big 12, even though that other team's not in the Big 12, you have to do it. I'm sorry.
But this whole sign stealing thing, I just don't like Michigan. It's just, and I'm like,
who does? But
well, I know, you're right. But who likes Texas either? So that's fair. That's fair. I wish there was a tie like in soccer or something.
Yes, please. Postpone it or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that Baylor's going to cover. In fact, I do think Utah's going to cover. I think Dequan Finn is going to turn it over a few times in this one. I think that Utah defense is going to be very impressive. I do think this one will be close in the first half. I think Baylor will put together successful drives. I think Utah will stall at points, but I do think Utah will figure it out. I think they will get rolling. I think Cam Rising has another big game and silences the few critics he has after this past weekend. I feel like he's going to throw for a few touchdowns. The Utah running game will look solid in this one as well. And I'm going to go Utah to cover 34-16.
Oh, you're just like these Utah fans I keep hearing about. This is it right here. Just think you're going to come in here and just walk all over everyone in this conference.
Okay, that's fair. I thought you said, I was like, you have to come to us. That's the difference from last
year. Yes, true. Which I talked about this off mic. This is going to be famous last words. I have not run into these Utah fans yet. I have heard about them. I've seen them, not at me. I've seen them. No. I know they're out there. Trust me. But it hasn't happened to me yet. We'll see. Maybe now is the time.
I get roped in as being arrogant as well too, and I'd like to throw out there, Utah can there's absolutely a world where Utah will fall short of everything they set out to be. But I also challenge any Big 12 fan, when you had all your conference, like these guys who won you conference championships returning to your team, you're set up with a favorable schedule where you literally play 2 ranked opponents as of right now on it. Like, to not predict Utah to at least go 10-2 and like be right in the thick of the Big 12. I think if every other Big 12 team had the components that Utah had, roster to schedule, they would feel the exact same way that me and many Utah fans do in our confidence that Utah is going to get it done. And I do believe that starts against Baylor, but it's going to be fun just to get some Big 12 football back. Can't wait for things to get underway on Saturday. We are both coming back with shows before then too, so you can check us out Friday as we'll be offering up some last minute predictions to see if Dave Aranda can make that really career defining win, because it very well might extend his career, or if Utah will live up to the hype and look like one of the premier teams in the conference. Cam, I can't wait for it.
Me neither. This is fun. Big 12, non-Big 12 football is so back. The Big 12 football that is not supposed to be Big 12 football. I'm here for it. I don't know why neither team could just schedule someone else. I mean, we've done it on like a week's notice before, but I don't care. Let's do it. Who cares? Let's play it.
Someday, 30 years from now, our like grandkids or kids will be like, Dad, did you know that the Utah Baylor game in 2024 was a non-conference game, even though Utah just moved to the conference? And we'll get that tier like, yes, we do.
Get the tape.
Exactly. It's going to be so much fun, though, just like this was with you. Cam, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I love our crossovers, and I love that each of our fan bases can get the varying perspectives. Big fan of that.
I do as well, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this rivalry could potentially continue to evolve, because it was a thrilling game last year. Will this year's be? That's what we'll find out shortly, but that will do it for this crossover edition. If you guys want more Locked On Utes or Locked On Baylor, make sure you guys check out our shows. We come at you every day with Utah and Baylor content, and we'll be coming at you as well after the game on Saturday. That's going to do it for this crossover edition, but we'll be back soon talking more Utah and Baylor football.